सफीर पाकिस्तान, आपके जज्बों का तर्जुमान। वतन से दूर, वतन की आवाज और आपकी पहचान, सफीर पाकिस्तान।
Provide $1.5 billion a year in economic
let us
aid
build
to
relationships
Pakistan.
around cultural
And
exchange.
I've watched as you have been an important
Pakistan has a future to play in the whole world.
आपके कारनामों, आपकी कामयाबियों, एहसासात, ख्यालत पर मबनी प्रोग्राम सफीर पाकिस्तान।
Paul, I'm very proud to be a Pakistani. I'm proud of my country.
समाजी, सखाफती, इस्लामी और सियासी राब्तों का एक नाम सफीर पाकिस्तान।
Ali Khan Lifetime Achievement Award for his services.
I want to recognize Safir Pakistan, Mr. Waqar Khan.
Mr. Waqar Khan, if there's anybody who should be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, it's him.
हर जगह, हर पल आपका अपना सफीर पाकिस्तान नजर आता है। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाज़रीन, आपका मेज़बान वक़ार अली ख़ान प्रोग्राम सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान के साथ हाज़िर खिदमत है। सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान, आपकी आवाज़, आपके राब्तों का एक नाम सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान। अमेरिका में और कनाडा में सबसे ज़्यादा देखा जाने वाला प्रोग्राम ऑफ कोर्स सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान, वन एंड ओनली। ये अवामी प्लेटफार्म है, ये आपकी आवाज़ है, ये आपकी पहचान है, ये आपकी महक है और खुशबू है, और ये वतन की खुशबू भी है जिसको आप महसूस करते हैं। सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान आपके दिलों की धड़कन, सच है ना? और हाँ नाज़रीन, बहुत जल्द सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान पूरे यूरोप में फैल जाएगा। यूरोप के कोने कोने में सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान बहुत जल्द देखा जाएगा। नाज़रीन, आज एक भरपूर मुलाकात, एक बहुत ऐसी मुलाकात जो कि आप पहले भी मिल चुके हैं कई बार, आपके हमारे सबके जाने पहचाने एक ऐसी शख्सियत जिसको आप देखकर बहुत खुश होंगे। लेकिन इन सब तमाम चीज़ों से पहले आइए देखते हैं कि आज हमारे प्रोग्राम डायरेक्टर ने क्या कुछ डिज़ाइन किया आपके लिए और क्या कुछ ला रही हैं। आपको पता है कि आपके प्रोग्राम डायरेक्टर हैं फातिमा खान, जो प्रोग्राम को डायरेक्ट करती हैं और सारी प्रोग्रामिंग लाइन अप करती हैं। नाज़रीन, आइए देखते हैं उस प्रोग्राम की कुछ झलकियाँ। नाज़रीन, तो आप देख रहे थे प्रोग्राम की हाइलाइट्स, और आइए अब पेश करते हैं जिस इंटरव्यू का आपको बेचैनी से इंतज़ार है। नाज़रीन, ऑफ कोर्स डॉक्टर सोहेल मसूद की शख्सियत किसी भी तारुफ की मोहताज नहीं है। उन्होंने लॉस एंजलिस में रह के बहुत से ऐसे काम अंजाम दिए जिसको आज तक आवाम याद रखते हैं, और क्यों याद ना रखें। ये वही शख्स हैं जिसने सफ़ीर पाकिस्तान को आगे बढ़ाने में मदद की, ये वही शख्स है जिसने उर्दू अदब को हेल्प की, ये वही शख्स है जिसने चैरिटी और वेलफेयर इदारों की मदद की, ये वही शख्स है जिन लोगों को मुलाजमतें दी, ये वही शख्स है जिसने लोगों को बिज़नेस में डाला और उनको आगे बढ़ाने में मदद की, और उसका नाम है डॉक्टर सोहेल मसूद। आपको पता है कि डॉक्टर सोहेल मसूद कई इदारों के सरबराह रह चुके हैं, जिनमें एक इनकी कंपनी थी क्रेसेंट हेल्थ केयर, जो उन्होंने बेच दी, लेकिन अभी भी वो उसके 33% ओन करते हैं इस कंपनी की, जो बहुत बड़ा अदारा था होम इन्फ्यूजन और हेल्थ केयर का। इसके अलावा इनकी कंपनी थी ब्लैक स्टोन, वो भी बड़ी अच्छी रही। उसके बाद ऑफ कोर्स इन्होंने एक और कंपनी लॉन्च की है जिसका नाम है काबा फ्यूजन। ही इज़ बैक इन द सेम बिजनेस, होम इन्फ्यूजन। काबा फ्यूजन जो है वो इस वक्त 22 स्टेट में फॉल है और काम कर सकती है, जिसमें ये प्रोवाइड करते हैं होम इन्फ्यूजन सर्विस विच इज़ कॉल्ड इम्यून ग्लोबुलिन। इसके अलावा ऑफ कोर्स न्यू जर्सी में उनका सेटअप है, उसमें तमाम किस्म की थेरापी करते हैं, एंटीबायोटिक, टीपीएन, कीमोथेरापी और इम्यूनोग्लोबुलिन। डेफिनेटली लेकवुड में इनकी अपनी कंपाउंडिंग सोल्यूशन फार्मेसी है, और ऑफ कोर्स ही इज एक्वायरिंग सेवरल अदर बिजनेसेस नेशन वाइड। तो ये खुसूसी इंटरव्यू और मुलाकात की है हमारे जो हेल्थ के ब्यूरो चीफ हैं, उनका नाम है डॉक्टर सैयद आरिफ जमाल। ये ट्रॉमा और इमरजेंसी के दी एक्सपर्ट हैं और इन्होंने कोड एंड प्रोसीजर्स लिखे हैं टेक्सास स्टेट के इमरजेंसी और ट्रॉमा सेंटर के लेवल 1, लेवल 2, लेवल 3, लेवल 4। ये इनकी क्रिएशन है जो आज तक वो लागू है और आइंदा भी बहुत सारे मेडिकल पे इंटरव्यू करेंगे। और अगर आप चाहते हैं कि आपका भी इंटरव्यू किया जाए तो डेफिनेटली सफीर पाकिस्तान से राब्ता कीजिए, तो डॉक्टर आरिफ जमाल आपके पास आएंगे और आपका इंटरव्यू करके दूर तक ले जाएंगे। तो ये देखते हैं कि ये मुलाकात कैसी रही और इस मुलाकात में क्या कुछ हुआ। मुलाहिदा फरमाइए ये रिपोर्ट।
We all like something special. He likes it personal. He likes a private space. He prefers it laid back. She likes a bedtime story. He likes to dream of his own. How would you like to fly with the best? Etihad Airways, the world's leading airline.
Dear audiences, this is Dr. Syed Arif Jamal. I welcome you to the Safir Pakistan. I'm the Medical Bureau Chief of the Safir Pakistan, and today we have a very important guest with us, Dr. Sohail Masood, who works with IVIG infusions and many home therapies for the very sick patients of medical conditions like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and he's been a graduate of USC in California, has many years of experience in that. So let's have his opinion about these diseases and see what he is doing to cure the humanity from these diseases. Thank you. Here is Dr. Sohail Masood.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to start with just giving you quick information about what we are doing right now. Crescent Healthcare Inc. was a company that I started many years ago, about 20 years ago, and mainly focusing on intravenous medications like TPN, antibiotics, pain management, chemotherapy, and specializing in IV immune globulin for neuromuscular disorders. Actually, we started the very first 2 patients in America on IVIG back in 1990, and we saw tremendous benefits for those patients who had neuropathies, and they were pretty much wheelchair bound. We gave them the infusions and they got up and they started walking. So in the last 20 years, therapy has a lot of other benefits. Besides CIDP, it also benefits patients who have myasthenia gravis, multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré, and recently there is a study going on at Baxter to see the efficacy of IVIG in Alzheimer's disease. So in 1992 to 2004, I ran Crescent mainly in California, but providing IVIG, which is immune globulin, nationwide. Then in 2004, I sold majority shares in the company, and then took a break, built an infusion pump company called Mass Medical, and in 2007, I sold it to Baxter Healthcare. And now I'm back again in the home infusion industry with a new company called Kaaba Fusion. Kaaba Fusion name comes from Kaaba, the building in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And my feeling is that it's a very sacred and very good name for my company, because I'm looking at how the humanity will benefit from what we are doing, and Kaaba Fusion will lead us into not just taking care of the medical part of healthcare, but also the spiritual part, and talking about interfaith and what IVIG does and what other therapies will do. So right now we have 2 offices. One is in Norwalk, California, and the other one is in Metuchen, New Jersey. Right now we're in Dallas looking at buying another home infusion pharmacy, and the goal is to have 4, the 4th one hopefully in Florida somewhere. Right now we're looking at Gainesville or Orlando. So the goal eventually is to continue providing these therapies, which are very important for healthcare, and a lot of patients patients especially coming from Middle East and Iran and Pakistan, they have a lot more prevalence of these diseases, and I'm hoping that people who are listening to us will try to understand more about their neuropathies, if they have neuropathies in their legs, or they're getting muscle weakness, to go to neurologists and talk about these diseases. So I'm hoping that IVIG will be something that these patients can benefit from. Thank you.
Sir, tell us a little bit about the background, what interested you, and how was your experience in coming and studying in the USC, and what interested you into going into the pharmacy and taking this as your career?
I finished my FSc from Pakistan in Lahore and moved to America in 1981. And I did my undergrad at USC in biology, and I got into the pharmacy school in 1984. And in 1988, I got my doctor of pharmacy, and I did 1-year residency at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. Then I went back to Los Angeles, and I was looking for a home infusion company to work at. That was really the beginning of the AIDS epidemic in America. And I felt that home infusion was the kind of therapy which was going to really benefit that patient population. So I focused on home infusion. I started learning more. While I was doing it, I was offered a job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles to establish their home infusion pharmacy. And that's where I met Dr. King Ingle, who is a godfather of neurology. And with him, I learned the use of IVIG, and that was the first time we used, actually in the whole USA, those 2 patients were introduced by Dr. King Ingle on IVIG. And from that point on, everybody else, including NIH, they did a lot of research, which Crescent was involved in. And we did research on another disease called stiff person syndrome, where IVIG was beneficial. So goal for me was really, I didn't want to be a pharmacist working at a hospital or in retail pharmacy, but focusing on home infusion, where we really get to know the patients, and we are the bridge between the patients and the doctor. So usually we are managing those patients, and our nurses go out and they infuse the drugs, and that's how we manage these patients. And carbofusion, just like Crescent, takes all kind of insurance agreements, Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and we provide all kind of therapies.
Shukriya, thank you so very much. There's a lot of people who may be wondering about what IVIG is. Not many people are physicians and pharmacists like you, and you're with highly educated background. Would you like to explain what IVIG itself is, and how does it work and help these patients?
IVIG is a blood product. It's taken from human blood. They are basically the immune globulins, which are they provide body the autoimmunity. And immune globulins in a normal person where there is no disease going on, antibodies or immune globulins provide immunity to the body. But what happens in these neuromuscular diseases or other autoimmune diseases, including even the skin disorders called pemphigus and pemphigoid diseases, the immune globulins become the attacking molecules, and they start really attacking the nerves, where the nerve endings come into the muscle. So that prohibits the impulses from going from the brain to the muscles, and muscles start dying. And as we know, the majority of the body has muscles, either it's your vocal cords or your diaphragm, breathing. So all kind of muscles in the body are affected, not just the skeletal muscles. And eventually patients who have these autoimmune diseases die from this disease because of the muscle weakness in the body.
Shukriya, thank you so very much for that input. There has been recently new research and studies which has focused on Alzheimer's and dementia. And as you know, Alzheimer's and dementia is a very problematic condition, affects a lot of people, and affects people of all nations, all kinds, all over the world. So can you tell us a little more about how the IVIG has been shown to be beneficial in this condition?
Right now, dementia or early onset of Alzheimer's disease is very little is known about what really causes these problems, and it is not really only in the elderly patients. We are seeing much younger population getting Alzheimer's, even 60s and sometime even 40s, especially patients who have some other born diseases or genetic disorders are more prone to having Alzheimer's at earlier stages. And just like in body, where we talked about the nerve endings not meeting and conveying the message to the muscles, in Alzheimer's there are certain bodies which are developed in the brain which are called the plaques. And the plaques are kind of proteins, beta amyloid proteins, which are causing the same kind of problem that we see in the extremities where the muscles are not getting the message. Those beta amyloid proteins are causing the brain function to be prohibited and start the onset of Alzheimer's. And what they have seen in the studies with IV immune globulin is that if the Alzheimer's is caught in early stages, there's a very strong chance that there may not be any progression of the disease. But as we know, this is an autoimmune disorder just like CIDP and Guillain-Barré. Those patients may need repeated infusion of this IV immune globulin, which is a very expensive drug, usually costs around $10,000 a month. So a lot of insurance companies are not willing to approve it until FDA gives approval. So Baxter is doing the main study, and there's a possibility that by 2014, IVIG, immune globulin, may be approved by FDA for early onset Alzheimer's. They may not still give it to elderly patients or patients who may have progressed to a point where it's very hard to reverse the process. So basically, immune globulins prohibits the plaque formation. And there's a kind of disease which is like Alzheimer's, but it is in the nerves, and it's called inclusion body myositis, where you see the same kind of beta amyloid protein plaques. And we see that my son has a Down syndrome, and we have seen same beta amyloid proteins developing in the population with Down syndrome. And there we see even an earlier onset of Alzheimer's than in the general population. So Alzheimer's is a very a disease which really doesn't have a cure yet, and the drugs which are available are not really that effective. And there are some drugs like Aricept and other ones, but IV immune globulin is going to be the most effective therapy for Alzheimer's. That's what the research is saying so far.
Now, as on the popular belief, as many people, when somebody in the family is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or conditions like this which you explained, people feel like that these are just diseases which have no cure, no end, and the person eventually is either going to be in the nursing home, being invalid or in a vegetative state, or may unfortunately die with these. Now, what can be done, and how can the media help to educate the people about how to catch these diseases early?
Well, dementia is something that comes with people getting older. Even I feel like I have dementia sometimes because we forget about things that we just learned or we saw. We may be going somewhere, we put the pen and a paper on a table and we forgot where we put it. But in dementia, which is eventually in some patients, not all the dementia turn into Alzheimer's, but some patients, if it becomes Alzheimer's, it is really the forgetfulness, but to a point where eventually they even forget who their loved ones are, and there is really a total isolation that these human beings get into. The problem is if you don't see the symptoms and signs, especially the family members, it may be too late to get diagnosed. So the family is really responsible for monitoring the patients who may be getting forgetful and not take it lightly, especially in a little older population. I would say maybe 65 years and older. We need to be even more careful and not just take it as something just old age, but really start thinking about Alzheimer's. Those patients should go and see their primary neurologist, and the neurologist may eventually send them to people who may know more about Alzheimer's. And there are different kind of testings. They're not really all very comprehensive, and that is another part of this whole disease process that we are still learning about it. So the diagnosis is a little difficult, and unfortunately there are no therapies, and if IVIG is not used, there is a possibility that most of these patients, because of their Alzheimer's, will become incapacitated. They cannot live alone. They cannot be left actually alone because they may just get out of their houses and start wandering. So there is a lot of education that those patients need, and that's where Kaba Fusion becomes a key teacher, because we have pharmacists who understand these diseases and they know how to tell the family what to do in case of Alzheimer's, in case of dementia, in case of other diseases like neuropathy. So my pharmacists are all clinically oriented. Our nurses are very well aware of how the disease is being caught at early stage and how to treat it with IV immune globulin.
Thank you so very much for your input on that. Another thing which is very important, many of these diseases cause very excruciating pain to the patients, and there's a lot of people who just because of pain, they end up not able to go to their work. They become a problem at their home with their inability to support their families, and many of these diseases cause severe pain in the legs, severe pain in the backs, or other kind of pain disorders. Can you please help us and tell us about how these kind of medications and treatment will help in the pain for those people?
If the pain is coming from, again, CIDP, which is a kind of chronic neuropathy, mainly in the feet and in the arms and fingers, they become numb, and eventually it came to a point where those numbness and tingling will start hurting patients. I have known patients who have their tingling is so bad that they have to put their feet in the ice water because it's really burning. They feel that their feet are on fire. Patients who, the first thing that we should do is really look at where the numbness or pain or tingling is coming from. There is a part of disease called diabetic neuropathy. So patients who have diabetes may have this kind of numbing, tingling, and pain, but CIDP and diabetic neuropathy are two different diseases. IV immune globulin is really beneficial in the pain coming from CIDP. There are some diabetic neuropathy patients who have a component of CIDP in their numbness, and that's one thing they should really encourage their primary physician to do, because sometimes the primary physicians who are taking care of the diabetic patients, they say, oh, it's just from diabetes, we have nothing we can do about it, just take something for your pain, and they may give some Tylenol and other kind of stuff. But there may be a component of CIDP, and we have seen about 10% to 15% of the patients with diabetic neuropathy who have a CIDP component, which is completely treatable by IV immune globulin. The other thing doctors have used are steroids, but unfortunately in patients who have diabetes, you will not give them steroids because it may cause exacerbation of their diabetes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Also, there has been debates about that IVIG is expensive, and then some of the insurances, and as we and I as a physician have seen many times, that any time when there's certain treatment which is expensive, the insurance companies, they try not to cover it because of the expense they have to bear with us. Economically, and as seeing the whole picture, by my research, it feels like that if a treatment is given, then that person can have a productive life. So the burden to society, give us your opinion. What may be the burden to society if a person is treated with society bearing the expense of the treatment, or if the person is not treated and then society having to take care of that person for many, many years to come?
This is a very good point, because at the end of the day, insurance companies will always try not to pay for expensive therapies. And it's not just for immune globulin. We have seen it in stem cells, and we have seen it in other kind of expensive surgeries and treatments that insurance companies will really try not to pay for it. And when I started Crescent Healthcare Inc. back in 1992, these drugs were not really covered by insurance companies. Blue Cross was not paying for it, Blue Shield was not paying for it, Medicare was not paying for it, Medicaid was not paying for it. And I really fought for our patients. I had a whole list of companies, insurance companies, including Medicare, where I had to go to Capitol Hill and fight for the rights of those patients. And the reason that I was able to convince those insurance companies and Medicare and Medicaid was the fact that these patients, and they can be, and from any walk of life. I had a guy who was a top guy at Xerox, ended up with CIDP, and all of a sudden his life is totally changed. Before he was going to work, he was productive and doing everything. All of a sudden he's wheelchair bound. So in those cases, the society needs to look at what really matters. Does it matter if this person is not going to work and stay home, where you can save that $10,000 a month, which is let's say $120,000 a year? But this person was really contributing a lot more to the society than that $120,000 expense. And not just that, most of these patients, either they have CIDP or myasthenia gravis, there's a possibility that every other month they end up in the emergency room of the hospital with the exacerbation of their disease. They may not be able to breathe. They will end up in the ICU, and the ICU visit costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just for one time. So if the patient ends up in the emergency room and then ends up in the ICU and ends up being at the hospital for a few days and eventually getting IVIG in the hospital, it's a lot of money for the insurance companies. So I was really able to convince Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Medicare to approve this drug, because at the end of the day, the quality of life, if you look at it, it's not just the patient alone, it's also the caregiver who may have to quit his or her job and stay with the patient. And the thing is that you're not looking at just person not being able to walk, you're looking at the cost of getting the hospital bed, you're looking at the cost of getting the wheelchair, you're looking at the cost of getting oxygen tanks, and there's a whole lot of expenses that you may incur if you don't approve this IVIG. And that's why I was able to go to the senators and congressmen and convince them that IVIG should be approved on Medicare, and I was able to do it.
Okay. Thank you so very much for that. Now, I have many patients with these kind of conditions, and then also I've also had times in which we have to deal with other insurance companies, and we have to deal with other infusion companies. What I noted, and I have talked to some of the people and looked at your website and looked at your philosophy, looks like to me that your nurses and your pharmacists are actually putting more time in than what they may be getting out from these insurance companies. The way your philosophy is to have more of a homely and a family environment in treating these patients, and what looks to me that once you enroll a patient, you enroll the patient as one of your own. So how are you surviving in these tough economical times, taking this expensive treatment and putting that much time and effort into helping the people?
Excellent point, because we know in healthcare, cost is going up and the reimbursement is going down. And it's not just for carbofusion or the kind of services we provide, it's pretty much industry-wide problem where everybody is suffering from the rise in the cost of drugs and the decrease in the reimbursement from the insurance companies. And the problem is that the way I do and we provide services at carbofusion is very different than any other home infusion company. And what we do is, for example, IV immune globulin infusion may need from 6 to 8 hours of nursing time just sitting with the patient infusing the drug, and usually it's 5 days in a week and then 2 weeks off and 5 days again. So 8 hours a day of 5 days of therapy, the average nurse's salary, let's say, is $50, $60 an hour. You're talking about $500 a day that I'm paying my nurses to go out and infuse this drug. And insurance companies really don't pay. If they pay for the first hour. So rest of the 6, 7, 8 hours of infusion, I'm incurring the cost that we don't get paid. So what the other home infusion companies are doing, they're starting the infusion and letting the patient be alone, and patient has to take the catheter out and put the gauze band on again and all kind of things that I personally feel that it's very risky. There are no studies showing that patients who are getting intravenous immune globulin should be left alone without having a nurse available, or if not a nurse, somebody with a medical background, maybe not an RN, then at least an LVN. But it is very important that nurse is there. One of the side effects for IV immune globulin is um, um, besides anaphylaxis, there is a possibility if the infusion is not managed properly, the patient may have a stroke. And we know that if patient is home alone and has a stroke, would not know how to turn off the pump, would not know how to call 911. So you're really putting patient at risk. And a lot of home infusion companies, the nationwide companies, that's how they do it. But when we are looking at our patients and we are looking at the doctors, and they trust us because we were really the pioneers in this therapy, we believe that patients should not be left alone.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, you mentioned about the side effects, and tell me in your opinion, because the people who are watching our program would like to know. As you mentioned, the IVIG is a human or animal serum product, and are there any chances of any disease transmissions, or what are the precautions taken in making sure that there is no transmission of any viruses from the source which is coming from, and other side effects which can happen? And in your experience, have you noted any of these happening?
Immune globulins are basically derived from human blood. So there are a group of donors who go to a donor facility, whether the donor facility is managed by Baxter or Telecris or any other company which makes immune globulin. And what it does is it takes the blood and it puts through the centrifuge and takes out the immune globulin. And while they're taking out the immune globulin, they also take out factor 8, factor 9, albumin. There are a whole kind of blood components which are taken out from the same donor pool. As we know, in the past, there was always a risk of immune globulins causing either hepatitis B, C, or any other kind of blood-borne diseases. But over the years, immune globulin fractionization has been improved to a point where the known communicable diseases are not transmitted from immune globulins. But still, it's a human blood product, so there can be a possibility of getting something that today we don't know about. For example, in the 1990s, early 1990s, there was concern with a lot of IV immune globulin prepared by Baxter at that time, that it may have caused something called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is also called mad cow disease. We were not sure really if that was the case or not, but after that, even the whole purification process for immune globulin became more extensive, and FDA really doesn't release any lot until it's tested for all those diseases. So today, we believe that immune globulins are safe and effective, and really they have very little side effects compared to all the other drugs which are available for the same diseases, because immune globulin causes the immune suppression without causing the patient's body to become more prone to diseases like steroids. So immune globulins at this point are very safe and effective.
Your time was very valuable for us, and I think all our audiences in GeoTV really appreciate the input you have given us, because these conditions and diseases affect all of our family members, our elders, and people who we know who may be around us and who may be in other countries, and they worry you. Tell me about this. What can be done for this treatments to be provided in the countries where it cannot be afforded? US is a very rich country, so it can be afforded here. What can be done, and how can we as the United States people and the pharmacists like you and the company owners help this out in places where people cannot afford it?
So one thing about the cost of the drug is in America, we have to pay the price of the availability of the drug. So we know that the price we're paying is much more than what the rest of the world is paying for the same drug. But we know that tomorrow, if there is a shortage, which sometimes happens with immune globulins, Americans always have the availability of IV immune globulin while the other countries may not, because the drug manufacturers make their most profit when they're selling this drug in America. There are cheaper alternatives. For example, in China or India, they are making their own immune globulins, but they cannot be imported into USA. USA FDA guidelines are very restrictive when it comes to human blood products. So none of the blood can be donated by people who are outside of USA or few European countries. Actually, most of the blood has to be from USA, even if the drug is made in Switzerland or Germany or wherever. When it comes to other countries, the restrictions are not as such, so there are cheaper alternative to IV immune globulin. And I know that in China, for example, the same immune globulin that we pay, let's say $70 a gram, in China you can get it for $35 a gram. So the difference in price is tremendous. And what we have done is, over the years, we have actually worked very closely with the manufacturers, and we have come up with plans, even in America, for the patients who cannot afford the drug, to have the manufacturer make a partnership with us where we are investing some of the money and manufacturers are investing some of the money, and we are giving actually these very expensive drugs free of charge. And what I have done recently is I have established our own foundation. Actually, I have two of them. Masood Family Foundation, which deals mostly with interfaith and civil rights in America, but this Immune Diseases Foundation is the other foundation that I just recently started, and that's where we are helping the patients with copays and deductibles and the expenses which are out of pocket, because if you're looking at $10,000 a month, even the copay for the patients and deductibles, if they have a 80-20 or 90-10 insurance plan, is tremendous. So we help those patients meet the financial needs of their therapy.
Thank you very much for all the medical input. Now let's go to your vision and personal life, and tell us about where you're living right now, what's your family environment like, and what is your hobbies, and what do you do in your spare time, if you get any?
Okay. So currently I live in Boston. We have been there for last 6 years. My daughter Layla is going to Wellesley College, and that was really the reason, actually the high school was the reason we moved to Boston. Before that, I lived in Los Angeles for almost 22 years. For me, LA is still my home. I was very involved in the local charity organizations and local civil rights organizations like CARE and AMPAC, and I was also involved with Council of Pakistan American Affairs, COPA. And then what we did was we did a lot of charity work for inner city kids in South Central Los Angeles with Governor Schwarzenegger's inner school program. Actually, at that time, he was still not the governor. He was still Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it was interesting working with him and taking care of those less privileged people in South Central LA. And what we did also was that we started looking at how the Muslim kids can be more involved in American, not just the politics, but the whole culture. And what we did was we started taking these kids and introducing them to congressmen and senators, and we used to go to Capitol Hill and do some things with them where they get to know these politicians and feel that they are part of the society. Eventually 9/11 happened, and after that I got even more involved with the politics, and we became very close to the Congressional Black Caucus, and we started working closely with Cynthia McKinney, who was a congresswoman at that time, and working with Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III. We started the programs for civil rights in America because we felt that our civil rights were threatened. So I got very involved with those things, and these organizations, especially CARE, we worked very closely, and we were able to change a lot of policies when it came to Muslim causes in America. Eventually, I ended up in Boston, and the first thing I did was I invited Governor Jamal to our house, and we had the Islamic Society of Boston, which is a local Muslim organization, and we got together and we wanted to know how Governor Deval Patrick will support the Muslims in Boston. When I arrived in Boston, the Islamic Society of Boston was shut down because there was lawsuit between them and another organization which was against having a mosque in the city. So we fought very hard, and eventually we were able to open the mosque, and now it's at full capacity, and we are hoping that we'll turn it into a real teaching institution where our library will be able to bring C-SPAN and introduce the Muslim writers and have a lot of coverage on TV. And my involvement with media has been since 1995 when Waqar Ali Khan started TV Pakistan. Actually, even before TV Pakistan, it was Radio Pakistan. So I have been involved with him, and I feel that media has very strong power, and if we know how to use it, and we have really used it in California because we had the sheriffs and we had the mayor and we had the governor. We'll invite them and we'll have them videotaped, and we'll have the show on TV, and they will see that. So they knew that this message that they are giving to a small TV outlet was going to go to a bigger community, and as we know in America, it's always election season. So we help those politicians who are good to us with spreading their name, and my goal is that we'll continue doing it. And whatever time I have a son with Down syndrome, so I'm very involved with Down syndrome organizations. I'm on the board of Down Syndrome Research and Treatment Foundation, and also in Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress. And we work very hard to get the legislation approved for kids with disabilities, not just Down syndrome, but all other kinds as well. And also just reading. I love reading, and I love history, and I love Islamic history, so I'm always reading books.
It was a real nice pleasure having you, sir, on the GeoTV, the medical portion of it. So, Nazreen, thank you so very much for listening and seeing our program. Thank you.
We all like something special. He likes it personal. He likes a private space. He prefers it laid back. She likes a bedtime story. He likes to dream of his own. How would you like to fly with the best? Etihad Airways, the world's leading airline.
नाज़रीन, तो वक्त है आपके मशहूर सेगमेंट, ऑफ कोर्स लोकल ग्लोबल। नाज़रीन, आज के लोकल ग्लोबल में बहुत कुछ शामिल है, तो आइए हम सब मिलकर देखते हैं ये लोकल ग्लोबल। नाज़रीन, आज सेंटा मोनिका पियर्स बीच पर एक शानदार तकरीब का इनेकाद हुआ है, जिसको आगा खान फाउंडेशन कैलिफोर्निया ने ऑर्गेनाइज़ किया है, और ये हर साल होती है पियर्स के ऊपर। ये बहुत ही खूबसूरत और हसीन जगह है, ये इज़ वेरी फेमस बीच। और आज यहाँ पे पॉवर्टी एलिवेशन के लिए जो है फंड रेज किया जाएगा, और ये वॉक है, इसमें ये लोग वॉक करते हैं। और आज यहाँ पे मेयर सेंटा मोनिका, फायर चीफ, पुलिस चीफ और काफ़ी डिग्निटीज़ जो हैं वो आए हैं। और आइए मैं आपको लिए चलता हूँ आज की इस इवेंट में, जहाँ से हम मुलाज़ा फरमाएंगे एक मुकम्मल प्रोग्राम। लॉस एंजलिस के खूबसूरत साहिल समंदर के किनारे पर होने वाली आगा खान फाउंडेशन वॉक नहायत कामयाब रही। लोगों की एक बड़ी तादाद ने शिरकत की, गुर्बत, अफलास, जहालत की दूरी के लिए बढ़ चढ़ कर हिस्सा लिया। हर साल होने वाली इस वॉक में भी अहम शख्सियात ने शिरकत की, जिसमें मेयर सेंटा मोनिका रिचर्ड ब्लूम भी शामिल थे। उन्होंने GTV से बातचीत करते हुए कहा, What the role of the Pakistani American in American economy?
Well, I think in bringing us all together around these important issues, we help build our local economies, build our state economies and the national economy. That spills over internationally. It's so important for our economies to be growing together.
मशहूर ज़माना पीट पैटरसन, प्रेसिडेंट एंड CEO ग्लोबल ग्रीन एडवाइजर गार्बाचोव ने अपने ख्यालात का इजहार करते हुए कहा, First of all, thank you very much coming to the Aga Khan Foundation. You're doing a great job, and you are doing a pretty good job. As you know that the Pakistan suffered with the earthquake, the floods, a lot of poverty is taking place in Pakistan. So I would like to have your views and opinion about today's event. And what do you think about the Aga Khan Foundation, how they are doing, what their agenda?
Well, I think the Aga Khan Foundation has done a tremendous job, not just to help people impoverished around the world, but in Pakistan, where it's faced terrible, terrible natural disasters, some of which have been made worse by climate change and the environment. And the Aga Khan Foundation is looking to meet those problems head on together. How do we deal with poverty and the environment? It's very impressive, and because it's such a volunteer-driven organization. Of course, Prince Aga Khan, His Highness, is an amazing leader, but so many volunteers around the world really just makes a tremendous difference.
Do you have any plan to do something for Pakistan, like flood victim, the earthquake victim, the poverty? Do you have any plan of your organization?
You know, our organization has had to try to be selective in where we put our resources. So we've put our effort in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and Haiti, given it's nearby our nation. We've done some effort to help our colleagues in Pakistan and friends in Pakistan to see how we could help raise resources for the need to continue to recover from the flooding. But our goal really to help the citizens of Pakistan in the long term is to help to reduce energy use here in the United States so that we're creating less global warming, meaning that we're going to create less severe weather around the globe, including in Pakistan. So that's what we're trying to do, is to help our nation take responsibility for our actions.
डॉक्टर फ्रैंकलिन डी ग्लेम, डीन ऑफ UCLA, ने अपने ख्यालात का इज़हार करते हुए कहा,
Well, I think this is a perfect example of global citizenship. People here in the United States, in Santa Monica, working for a global cause and to alleviate world poverty. It strikes me as fundamental. And in fact, what we see here in the United States, this Occupy movement is about the exact same thing. And it goes to show poverty in one place impacts poverty in another.
What's the message to the world? Because you are dealing with the global affairs.
Yes, well, I think that what's interesting is this is sort of the action part, right? We're the theory part, but what this organization is really doing is putting that theory into action. And I think that's what's critical.
What do you think about the Pakistani-American role in America?
Well, as with all hyphenated Americans, I think that the Pakistani-American community has a very vital role to play here, both in explaining the culture to the broader country, but also as participating as Americans in the system.
इस प्रोग्राम में नौजवानों ने भी भरपूर शिरकत की।
I think it's great. I am here to support building resilient communities and be a part of the solution to end global poverty.
It's amazing. I think that everything the Aga Khan Foundation puts on is it's a class act, and we're excited to be here and hopefully raise some money and awareness for a good cause.
Our goal is to just spread peace and awareness to everybody, and we're really happy to be here and support this great cause.
मेयर सेंटा मोनिका मेयर ब्लूम ने आगा खान वॉक का इफ्तिताह किया और 5,000 लोगों ने वॉक की और इसमें चंदा भी दिया। इस मौके पे आगा खान फाउंडेशन वॉक के चेयर जनाब अनवर ने अपने ख्यालात का इज़हार करते हुए कहा,
We were expecting about 5,000 walkers over here. This is the 9th walk this year in the US. And as we said earlier, we've already collected $42 million, not counting this year's contributions, and we have helped over 12 million donors. So the idea is to collect as much money, as much interest, as much intellectual resources to help eliminate global poverty.
पाकिस्तानी इंडियंस और बांग्लादेशी बहन भाइयों का डेरा, आप हमारे यहाँ तशरीफ लाइए। हर किस्म के बारबेक्यू और दूसरे खानों से लुत्फ अंदोज होइए। शुक्रिया।
नाज़रीन, इसके साथ ही आपका मेज़बान वकील खान आपसे जाएगा। अल्लाह हाफ़िज़। Pakistan, Faizabad.